Like, I love the feeling when things are really complex and chaotic, and out from nowhere you have an answer where you wouldn't have had that answer if it wasn't that disarray. And even in like materials, when you line up stuff, I don't know like how artistic, but even in mathematics, it's where like even in odd numbers, they're great because they go hand in hand. I guess the opposites attract. In the physicality of Newtonian physics. So those three examples encompass how there's always two sides to either argument. And so it's just the fact that like when people are alive, and then you would never think that they would want to hurt someone else because no one would want to not be alive. But then there's Fauci proclaiming he has diagnosed himself with amnesia and he can't remember names to Congress. So it's these diagnoses. This morning I said I had sleep apnea. I was just joking, but there's like this physical neurolysis. That covers just about any odd motion of articulate with no one's like infinitely coordinated. Like there's no one who is infinitely coordinated. So the fact, and if you were trying to follow the action of like having all the molecules in the perfect alignment, there's always like, that's not how physics or chemistry is. It's where like if you were to breathe pure air, carbon dioxide, then like it would be detriment. And that's why like there's the whole notion of like resistant bacteria. And so that's like the middle ground of how there's two sides of every argument, where at least there's one where it's not holding up proclaiming non-existence, extinction, if you will. In a health food store, there's like all these MTC oils, and then there's also like a great amount of oil that you produce in your body. And in watching Joe Rogan, I don't, but I watch little clips here and there, so I know his basic stanza. And it's like, we reproduce a lot of these psychoactive things in our body naturally through glands. It's just like they're not activated from the outside going in. They're already been in, and we're born up through them so that it seems normal. And so that parallel in knowing the word. So I wanted to stay the F away from zoology and animals, and because I don't know, it just seems low level going around talking about animals. An animal lover, it's that or my care for kids. I'm not an adult who has them, but I understand that they love riding on carts. I see all the time when the adults are pushing a cart and the kids jump on it. Acrobatically, there's all these different maneuvers of jumping onto carts, and there's nothing short of different ways in doing so. It would almost remind me of, in movies, those riding the rails. There's these railroad tracks, but specifically having these like wheelbarrows with wheels on them. Go figure, right? But designed for the train tracks, and people would be, I've never seen Indiana Jones, but in the movie where they have like a chase in these things on the railroad tracks, and it's just oddly similar, that same fashion being conducted in makeshifts. The shift. Most of the cargo, I didn't notice, but a lot of this things, material goods come through the railroad. whether it comes from a cargo ship first, boring as painstakingly boring, slow as death. The cargo ships then put it on the railroads. Upwards to over 80% of goods are from the rails. Try to fact check everyone and make sure no one can go outside when they're saying it's like dangerous to go outside. And you know, I didn't want to say it, but it's just like painstakingly obvious. And you know, I can be told I'm speaking against authority, but you know, I've already talked to cops and they all, like, except for one of them, wouldn't make anyone stay in their house. So, you know, I'm not sorry for saying what I just did, because it's painstakingly obvious, and that's, you know, enough to make me want to jump off something. It's, you know, like enough to make me want to jump. Alright, let's start over. It's fucking ugly ass thing. And in computers in general, like when they were first introduced with the internet, like everyone had no idea unless you were a guru to begin with, working with one of these computer companies. And so the more that I see that they're trying to hide things that are open sourcey, like the whole Linux complex, it's more of just evidence where the stigmatization wouldn't be necessary if the propaganda was useless. What this means is the more that there's like the knowledge of how like antennas work within these different like computer ways of handling them, like almost anything can be a computer if you have just like a SSD drive. In a roundabout, like when you're driving a car, in the court of law, they call it the living body. And so like, that's because it can take your life if you do the wrong thing. In the court of law, the living body of the court of law will actually sentence you for an entire life. So in that respect, it's the exact same definition of what coding does when it executes. It's just like the action. And so like in, like, I guess formulating momentum is like the biggest catch, because the electric flowing through wires, it seems like there's no momentum. And that's where like binary implications need to start if you have to start makeshifting a lot. And so it would be, as it were, the primordial nature in things, you know, the existence of livelihood. What better example to explain this than dinosaurs? You know, not all of them were carnivores. It's an argument of everything has two sides, but if you're always having two-sided trade deals, you know, the give or take notion when it comes to these dinosaurs, if you're explaining how all animals are bloodsuckers because they eat each other, and so in eating each other they ingest their blood, they're bloodsuckers. But then the bravada, the gall to say that like the carnivores or the vegetarian animals eating plants, that plant juice is the agave nectar, relating that to a local blood that most resembles whatever plant that they're currently eating. So there's a certain amount of dexterity between liquids. And when you're speaking so vastly, loose lips, if you will, when it comes to like what is or isn't, sleep apnea or amnesia, to say that, the bug eaters with like Beetlejuice, like all this radiating the agave liquid and then blood to those things, that all animals are bloodsuckers because of that. But the primordial effect, more or less, is like how the body language and attention to someone when they're like handling meat, because that's their livelihood, their staple food. To a vegetarian, it would be like how they are when handling vegetables. And this is like the primordial sense, because if that's taken away, it's like of the utmost threat to them not being able to have a quality of life. And so that's real important in how people are handling those important things. And what better example is like the dinosaurs, if you could show that in a full totality, it would speak numbers.